The air was thick with the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers as I strolled through the expansive garden show. It was early summer, and the vibrant colors of the blossoms seemed to dance in the sunlight. This annual event was a highlight for gardening enthusiasts like my wife Emma, who had a keen eye for the most exquisite flora. As I watched her marvel at a display of hybrid roses, her excitement was palpable. Emma's long chestnut hair glinted in the sunlight, and her smile lit up her face as she chatted animatedly with the exhibitor. I stood back, content to observe her joy in these moments. Suddenly, a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Excuse me, sir, are you interested in learning more about these orchids?" The voice belonged to Eric, a tall and lean man with a warm smile and an air of quiet confidence. He was one of the exhibitors, dressed in casual yet elegant attire that seemed at home amidst the floral splendor. I turned to see him gesturing toward a stunning array of orchids. "They're quite exquisite," he continued, his voice carrying a hint of pride mixed with genuine passion. "Each one has a unique story, a journey from seed to bloom." I nodded, somewhat distracted by Emma's infectious enthusiasm as she moved on to examine a display of bonsai trees. Eric noticed my gaze drifting towards her and chuckled softly. "Your wife seems to have a true love for gardening," he remarked, his eyes twinkling with admiration. "Yes, she does," I replied, feeling a pang of pride mixed with a tinge of melancholy. Emma's dedication to her garden had always been a source of mutual admiration between us, but lately our conversations had centered more on schedules and responsibilities than on the shared passion that had once brought us together. Eric nodded thoughtfully, as if sensing my unspoken thoughts. "It's wonderful to see someone so immersed in their passion," he commented. "She has a keen eye for beauty." I found myself drawn into conversation with Eric, discussing the finer points of horticulture and the challenges of maintaining a garden in changing seasons. His knowledge was impressive, and his love for plants was evident in every word he spoke. As the afternoon wore on, I noticed Emma and Eric engaged in an animated discussion about succulents. She was smiling brightly, her eyes sparkling with curiosity as Eric explained the intricacies of desert plants. It was then that I realized with a twinge of unease that Emma's interest in Eric's expertise seemed to go beyond mere admiration. Unsure of what to make of this realization, I excused myself and wandered aimlessly through the maze of floral exhibits. The vibrant colors and delicate fragrances that had initially captivated me now seemed overshadowed by a growing sense of uncertainty. Little did I know that this chance encounter with Eric at the garden show would mark the beginning of a journey filled with unexpected twists and heart-wrenching revelations. In the days following the garden show, Emma couldn't stop talking about Eric. His knowledge of plants, his enthusiasm for gardening, it had all left a lasting impression on her. She would recount their conversations in vivid detail, describing how Eric spoke about each plant as if it were a cherished friend with its own unique personality. At first I listened with mild interest, happy to see Emma so animated and passionate. Yet beneath my supportive facade, a seed of unease began to grow. Emma's fascination with Eric seemed to deepen with each passing day. She started mentioning him more frequently, casually dropping anecdotes about his latest gardening projects or insights into rare species. One evening, as we sat in our garden surrounded by the fragrance of freshly bloomed roses, Emma shared a story about how Eric had introduced her to a rare hybrid orchid that he was nurturing for an upcoming exhibition. Her eyes sparkled as she described the orchid's delicate petals and intricate color patterns, almost as if she were recounting a cherished memory. I nodded attentively, trying to suppress the gnawing feeling of insecurity that threatened to surface. "He's quite talented," I managed to say, forcing a smile. Emma smiled back, her expression momentarily faltering before she resumed her animated chatter about gardening techniques and plant care. It was as if she had found a new passion to replace the void that had slowly crept into our own relationship. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's visits to the garden show became more frequent. She would spend hours engrossed in conversation with Eric, eagerly absorbing his knowledge and expertise. Sometimes she would return home with a newfound enthusiasm, armed with gardening tips and ideas that she was eager to implement in our own garden. Meanwhile, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with the thoughts of Emma and Eric. What had started as a harmless fascination with plants had now evolved into something deeper, a connection that seemed to transcend the boundaries of casual friendship. One evening, as I returned home earlier than expected from work, I found Emma in the backyard, deep in conversation with Eric. They were standing by the rose bushes, their heads bent close together as they examined a cluster of blossoms. I watched in silence, a knot tightening in my stomach as I observed the easy camaraderie between them. Emma laughed at something Eric said, her laughter ringing out like a melody in the quiet evening air. It was a sound that once brought me joy, but now it filled me with a sense of unease. As they continued their conversation, oblivious to my presence, I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, jealousy mingled with betrayal, hurt intertwined with disbelief. How had we reached this point? When had Emma's admiration for Eric's gardening prowess crossed the line from innocent fascination to something more? Unable to bear the sight any longer, I turned away and retreated into the house, leaving Emma and Eric to their shared passion for plants and the growing bond that threatened to bloom into something I feared I could no longer control. In the days that followed that evening in the garden, Emma's conversations about Eric became more frequent and detailed. She would eagerly recount their discussions about various plants, garden designs, and upcoming garden show events. Each time she mentioned Eric's name, it was accompanied by a glow in her eyes and a lilt in her voice that hadn't been there before. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, engaging in polite conversation and feigning interest in Emma's newfound passion. Yet beneath my composed exterior, a storm of emotions brewed: doubt, jealousy, and a deepening sense of unease about the growing bond between Emma and Eric. One Saturday afternoon, Emma invited me to accompany her to the garden show. It was a gesture of inclusion that I appreciated, yet it also felt like a subtle invitation to witness firsthand the connection she had forged with Eric. As we wandered through the vibrant displays of flowers and plants, Emma's excitement was palpable. She greeted familiar exhibitors with enthusiasm, exchanging pleasantries and discussing the latest additions to their collections. I watched her closely, noticing how her eyes would occasionally scan the crowd, perhaps searching for a familiar figure among the sea of visitors. It wasn't long before we encountered Eric at his booth, surrounded by an array of meticulously arranged bonsai trees. His face lit up with a warm smile as he greeted Emma, his voice carrying a hint of genuine pleasure at seeing her again. "Emma, it's wonderful to see you," Eric said warmly, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he spoke. "I was hoping you'd stop by today. I have something new to show you." Emma's face lit up with curiosity as Eric led us to a secluded corner of his booth, where a rare hybrid orchid was displayed in all its glory. Its delicate petals shimmered in the dappled sunlight, casting a spell of enchantment over us. "Isn't she magnificent?" Eric asked, his voice filled with pride and admiration for the orchid he had nurtured with such care. Emma leaned in closer, her eyes sparkling with awe as she examined the intricate patterns and hues of the orchid's petals. "She's absolutely stunning," Emma replied softly, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. I stood back, observing the easy camaraderie between Emma and Eric, feeling like an outsider in their shared world of plants and passion. They spoke animatedly about the orchid's unique characteristics and the techniques Eric had used to cultivate it to perfection. As I listened to their conversation, a sense of displacement washed over me. Emma seemed to have found a kindred spirit in Eric, a connection based on shared interests and a deep appreciation for the beauty of nature. It was a bond that I couldn't compete with, no matter how hard I tried to understand or appreciate Emma's newfound passion. Throughout the afternoon, Emma and Eric continued their discussion, exchanging ideas and insights that excluded me from their intimate circle. I smiled politely and nodded along, but inside I felt a growing sense of isolation and despair. By the time we left the garden show that day, Emma was buzzing with excitement, eager to implement some of Eric's gardening tips in our own backyard. She talked animatedly about redesigning our garden space, incorporating new plant varieties, and perhaps even entering some of our plants in future garden show competitions. As we drove home in silence, the weight of Emma's growing connection with Eric hung heavy in the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that our once solid foundation was slipping away, replaced by a bond that I was powerless to understand or compete against. In the days following our visit to the garden show, Emma's interactions with Eric seemed to intensify. She would spend more time at the garden show, often returning with stories about Eric's latest gardening projects or the new plants he had introduced her to. Each anecdote was punctuated by a sparkle in her eyes and a genuine enthusiasm that I struggled to match. One evening, as we sat together in our living room, Emma pulled out her phone to show me a photo of a rare succulent that Eric had gifted her. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement. I glanced at the photo, forcing a smile as I admired the succulent's intricate patterns and vibrant colors. "It's stunning," I replied, my words hollow against the knot of insecurity tightening in my chest. Emma continued to talk animatedly about Eric, his passion for plants, his knowledge of gardening techniques, and the effortless way he seemed to connect with nature. She spoke of their conversations about soil pH levels, pruning techniques, and the intricacies of plant propagation with a level of enthusiasm that felt foreign to our own discussions. As the weeks passed, Emma began to mention Eric's name with increasing frequency, weaving his anecdotes and gardening tips into our everyday conversations. She would recount their discussions about the challenges of cultivating rare species or the satisfaction of watching a plant flourish under their care. I found myself retreating into a quiet solitude, grappling with feelings of jealousy and inadequacy that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Emma's admiration for Eric's gardening prowess had blossomed into a friendship that seemed to eclipse our own connection, a bond built on shared interests and a mutual passion for plants. One Saturday morning, Emma announced that she was planning to attend a gardening workshop hosted by Eric at the garden show. "It's an opportunity to learn more about orchid care," she explained, her eyes alight with anticipation. I nodded silently, masking the pang of jealousy that gnawed at my insides. "That sounds interesting," I managed to say, my voice strained with forced enthusiasm. Emma left for the workshop later that morning, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a sense of emptiness that echoed through our once vibrant home. I wandered through our garden, tracing the delicate outlines of blossoming flowers and leafy vines that had once been a source of shared joy between us. As I tended to the garden, memories of our early years together flooded my mind. The laughter we shared while planting seeds, the quiet moments spent watching sunsets from our garden bench, and the dreams we had woven into the fabric of our shared future. Yet amidst the blooming flowers and verdant foliage, I couldn't shake the growing realization that Emma's heart had drifted away, drawn towards a friendship that I couldn't compete with. That evening, Emma returned home from the workshop, her face radiant with newfound knowledge and excitement. She animatedly recounted Eric's teachings about orchid propagation and the intricacies of creating a balanced orchid habitat. Her words flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and enthusiasm that seemed to belong to a world where I no longer held a place. As I listened to Emma's stories, a sense of resignation settled over me. The growing friendship between Emma and Eric had become a reality that I could no longer deny. A bond nurtured by shared passions, and a connection that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. In the quiet moments that followed, I found myself grappling with the stark realization that our once unshakable foundation had been shaken to its core. Emma's growing friendship with Eric had cast a shadow over our relationship, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty and heartache. As weeks turned into months, Emma's friendship with Eric continued to flourish, deepening with each shared conversation and gardening expedition. Their bond seemed to transcend the realm of mere acquaintanceship, evolving into a connection steeped in mutual understanding and shared passion. I watched from the sidelines as Emma and Eric spent more time together, their interactions infused with an effortless camaraderie that had once been the hallmark of our own relationship. They would discuss plant varieties late into the evening, exchanging gardening tips and insights that forged a bond founded on a shared love for horticulture. One evening, after Emma returned from another outing with Eric, I found her sitting alone in our garden, her gaze fixed on the stars that shimmered in the night sky. Her face was illuminated by a soft glow, a reflection of the quiet contentment that seemed to settle over her whenever she spoke of Eric. I approached cautiously, unsure of how to broach the subject that had silently divided us. "Emma," I began tentatively, "how was your day?" Emma turned to me, her expression softening as she smiled gently. "It was wonderful," she replied, her voice tinged with warmth. "Eric and I visited a botanical garden today. We discovered a rare species of fern that he's been researching for months. The way he talks about plants, it's like he breathes life into each one." Her words resonated with a fervor that I hadn't heard in a long time, a passion that seemed to echo the admiration she once held for our own shared dreams and aspirations. Yet this time, it was Eric who had become the focal point of her enthusiasm, a presence that overshadowed my own efforts to connect. I nodded silently, struggling to mask the wave of insecurity and longing that threatened to engulf me. "He seems like a remarkable person," I managed to say, my voice betraying a hint of resignation. Emma's smile faltered momentarily as she regarded me with concern. "He is," she replied softly, her gaze searching mine for understanding. "He understands me in a way that no one else does. Our conversations, they're so effortless, so meaningful." Her words struck a chord deep within me, stirring a mixture of emotions that ranged from jealousy to a profound sense of loss. Emma had found in Eric a confidant, a kindred spirit whose passion for plants mirrored her own in ways that I couldn't compete with. In the days that followed, Emma's conversations about Eric became more introspective, filled with anecdotes about their shared experiences and the emotional depth of their bond. She would recount moments of vulnerability and shared laughter, painting a portrait of a friendship that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Meanwhile, I retreated further into the solitude of our home, grappling with feelings of inadequacy and heartache that seemed to deepen with each mention of Eric's name. Emma's emotional connection with him had become a reality that I couldn't ignore, a bond that eclipsed our own relationship in ways that left me feeling adrift and uncertain. One evening, as Emma and I sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hung heavy between us. "Do you love him?" I blurted out suddenly, unable to contain the question that had been gnawing at my insides. Emma's eyes widened in surprise, her expression caught between sadness and understanding. "I don't know," she replied honestly, her voice tinged with regret. "But I do know that he makes me feel alive, appreciated, understood." Her words pierced through the veil of my insecurities, laying bare the truth that I had feared to confront. Emma's emotional connection with Eric had awakened a longing within her, a desire for companionship and understanding that I had failed to provide. As I struggled to process Emma's confession, a sense of resignation settled over me. The growing bond between Emma and Eric had become a reality that I could no longer deny, a connection forged by shared passions and emotional intimacy that seemed to transcend the boundaries of our own relationship. In the quiet moments that followed, I found myself grappling with the stark realization that Emma's heart had found solace in the warmth of Eric's friendship, a comfort that I had failed to offer amidst the growing distance that had silently crept into our lives. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's relationship with Eric continued to evolve, deepening into a connection that seemed to transcend the boundaries of friendship. Their interactions became increasingly intimate, marked by shared moments of laughter, understanding, and a growing sense of emotional closeness that left me feeling like an outsider in my own marriage. I watched from a distance as Emma and Eric spent more time together, their conversations lingering late into the night and their laughter echoing through our once happy home. They would discuss gardening techniques with a passion that bordered on obsession, their shared enthusiasm for plants serving as a bridge that brought them closer together. One evening, as I returned home earlier than expected from work, I found Emma and Eric engrossed in conversation in our backyard. They were sitting side by side on the garden bench, their heads bent close together as they examined a rare species of fern that Eric had brought over for Emma to see. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched the easy camaraderie between them. Emma laughed at something Eric said, her laughter a melodic sound that seemed to fill the space between them with an intimacy that I couldn't deny. Unable to tear my eyes away, I witnessed a subtle shift in their interaction. a lingering touch of hands as they passed a gardening book back and forth, a shared smile that spoke volumes of unspoken emotions. It was at that moment that I realized with a sinking feeling in my gut that Emma's feelings for Eric had grown beyond the realm of friendship. As they continued their conversation, oblivious to my presence, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Jealousy mingled with despair, hurt intertwined with disbelief. How had we reached this point? When had Emma's admiration for Eric's gardening prowess crossed the line from innocent fascination to something more profound? Hours passed before Emma finally noticed my presence, her expression faltering as she turned to face me. "Oh, you're home early," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of guilt. I nodded silently, unable to find the words to articulate the turmoil raging inside me. Emma's eyes searched mine for understanding, a silent plea for forgiveness that I struggled to grant amidst the chaos of my own emotions. That night, as I lay awake in bed, the image of Emma and Eric together haunted my thoughts. Their growing chemistry had become a palpable presence in our home, a bond that seemed to eclipse the love and commitment we had once shared. In the days that followed, Emma's interactions with me became increasingly strained, her mind seemingly preoccupied with thoughts of Eric and their shared moments of intimacy. She would withdraw into herself, lost in a world where Eric's presence loomed larger than life, a presence that left me feeling like a shadow of the man she once loved. Meanwhile, Eric's visits to our home became more frequent, his presence a constant reminder of the growing distance between Emma and me. He would join us for dinners and weekend gatherings, his easy charm and genuine interest in our lives masking the underlying tension that simmered beneath the surface. One evening, as Emma and Eric shared a quiet moment in our garden, I overheard snippets of their conversation, words spoken in hushed tones that carried a weight of intimacy and longing that cut through me like a knife. They spoke of dreams and aspirations, shared experiences and unspoken desires that seemed to bind them together in ways that I couldn't comprehend. Unable to bear the agony of witnessing their growing closeness, I retreated into the solitude of our empty home, grappling with feelings of betrayal and heartache that threatened to consume me. Emma's emotional connection with Eric had become a reality that I could no longer ignore, a bond steeped in shared passion and a chemistry that seemed to defy all reason. As I stood alone in our darkened hallway, the echoes of their laughter and whispered confessions echoed in my ears, a painful reminder of the love and trust that had slipped through my fingers, replaced by a growing sense of isolation and despair. The tension in our home had reached a breaking point. Emma's growing closeness with Eric had cast a shadow over our marriage, leaving me grappling with feelings of betrayal and heartache that seemed insurmountable. Yet despite my mounting suspicions and the painful awareness of their deepening bond, I hoped against hope that Emma's feelings for Eric were merely a fleeting infatuation, a phase that would soon pass. One fateful evening, as I returned home from work, I found Emma and Eric standing close together in our backyard. They were engrossed in conversation, their voices low and intimate, their bodies leaning towards each other in a way that spoke volumes of unspoken desire. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart sinking as I watched Emma's hand reach out to touch Eric's arm gently, their eyes locked in a silent exchange of longing and anticipation, a palpable tension hanging in the air between them. Unable to bear the sight any longer, I cleared my throat loudly, causing Emma and Eric to startle apart. Guilt flashed across Emma's face, quickly masked by a forced smile as she turned to face me. "Welcome home," she said, her voice unsteady as she struggled to find the right words. Eric nodded awkwardly, his expression a mix of surprise and discomfort. "Hello," he managed to say, his eyes darting between Emma and me. I forced a tight-lipped smile, my hands clenched at my sides to mask the tremors of rage and hurt that threatened to consume me. "What are you two up to?" I asked, my voice strained with forced nonchalance. Emma exchanged a quick glance with Eric, her cheeks flushing slightly as she searched for an explanation. "We were just discussing some gardening plans," she replied hesitantly, her words tinged with guilt. Eric nodded in agreement, his gaze avoiding mine as he fidgeted nervously. "Yes, just some ideas for the upcoming garden show," he added, his voice betraying a hint of unease. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal rise within me, threatening to spill over in a torrent of accusations and hurtful words. How could Emma betray our marriage like this? How could Eric intrude upon our lives and steal away the woman I loved? Instead of confronting them then and there, I turned on my heel and stormed back into the house, slamming the door behind me with a resounding thud. I could hear Emma calling after me, her voice tinged with desperation and regret, but I ignored her pleas as I retreated into the solitude of our bedroom. Alone in the darkness, I struggled to make sense of the turmoil raging inside me. Emma's emotional affair with Eric had crossed a line that I had never imagined possible, a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical infidelity could. Hours passed before Emma finally entered the bedroom, her footsteps hesitant as she approached me cautiously. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen." I turned to face her, my eyes burning with unshed tears and the ache of a broken heart. "How could you?" I choked out, my voice raw with pain. "How could you do this to us?" Emma sank to her knees beside the bed, her hands reaching out to grasp mine in a desperate plea for forgiveness. "I don't know," she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never meant to hurt you." Her words pierced through the veil of my anger, stirring a mixture of emotions that ranged from betrayal to a profound sense of loss. The woman I had once loved with all my heart now sat before me, her actions and choices tearing apart the fabric of our marriage. In the silence that followed, I struggled to find the strength to forgive Emma, to understand the complexities of her emotions and the allure of a connection that had pulled her away from me. Yet, as I looked into her tear-filled eyes, I knew that our marriage had reached a crossroads, a moment of reckoning that would determine the fate of our shattered love. As Emma continued to plead for forgiveness, her words filled with remorse and regret, I wrestled with my own inner demons. Could I find it in my heart to forgive her betrayal? Could we rebuild the trust and intimacy that had been shattered by her emotional affair with Eric? In the darkness of our bedroom, surrounded by the echoes of our fractured love, I searched for answers that seemed just out of reach, a glimmer of hope amidst the ruins of our once happy marriage. Days have turned into a tense silence between Emma and me after the emotional upheaval of discovering her growing relationship with Eric. The air in our home hung heavy with unspoken words and lingering hurt, each moment fraught with the weight of betrayal and uncertainty about our future. Emma retreated into herself, consumed by guilt and regret for the pain she had caused. She would spend hours in our garden, tending to the plants with a distracted focus, her mind clearly elsewhere. Meanwhile, I struggled to make sense of the turmoil raging inside me. Anger, heartbreak, and a deep-seated longing for the love we had once shared. One evening, unable to bear the distance any longer, I confronted Emma in our living room. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Emma looked up from the gardening magazine she had been pretending to read, her eyes filled with apprehension. "I know," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation that had been building within me for days. "What happened between you and Eric?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Emma hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands folded in her lap. I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice tinged with regret. "It started innocently enough, with our shared passion for gardening, but then it became something more." Her words pierced through the silence that had enveloped us, laying bare the truth of her emotional affair with Eric. "I never meant to hurt you," Emma continued, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never thought it would come to this." My heart clenched at the sight of Emma's tears, a mixture of anger and heartache warring within me. "But it did," I replied, my voice strained with the weight of betrayal. "You let it happen." Emma nodded silently, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I know," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Silence hung between us, heavy with unspoken pain and shattered trust. I struggled to find the right words to express the depth of my hurt, the devastation of knowing that Emma's heart had strayed from our marriage. "What do you want, Emma?" I asked finally, my voice hoarse with emotion. "Do you still love me?" Emma looked up, her eyes searching mine for understanding. I don't know," she admitted honestly, her voice barely a whisper. "I love you, but Eric?" I finished for her, my heart breaking at the confirmation of my worst fears. Emma nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with anguish. "I have feelings for him that I can't ignore." The words hung between us like a heavy curtain, separating the life we had built together from the uncertain future that now lay before us. I felt a surge of anger and grief rise within me, battling against the love I still harbored for Emma despite everything. "I can't do this anymore, Emma," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't compete with Eric. I can't live like this." Emma's shoulders shook with silent sobs as she buried her face in her hands. "I understand," she managed to say, her voice muffled by tears. "I'm so sorry." With a heavy heart, I made a decision at that moment, a decision born out of pain and a desperate need to reclaim my shattered sense of self-worth. "I think we need some time apart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "To figure things out." Emma looked up, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. You can't mean that," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I do," I replied, my heart breaking anew at the anguish in her eyes. "I need time to heal, to understand what I want." Emma nodded silently, her tears falling freely now. "I understand," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, for everything." As Emma and I stood in the wreckage of our marriage, I knew that our path forward would be fraught with pain and uncertainty. But in that moment of heartbreaking clarity, I knew that I had to take a step back, to find a way to heal from the wounds of betrayal and rediscover the strength to rebuild my life, whether together or apart. With a heavy heart, I turned away from Emma and walked out of our home, leaving behind the shattered fragments of our once happy life together. In the aftermath of our confrontation, a heavy silence settled over our home. A silence fraught with the echoes of shattered trust and the painful realization that our marriage had reached its breaking point. Emma and I existed in separate spheres, each grappling with the aftermath of our emotional upheaval in our own solitary ways. For days I found solace in the quiet solitude of a small rented apartment, a temporary refuge where I could sort through the tumult of emotions that churned within me. Memories of Emma and our life together haunted my thoughts, mingling with the bitter taste of betrayal that still lingered on my tongue. Alone in the dimly lit apartment, I traced the contours of our fractured love, a love that had once been the bedrock of my existence, now reduced to shards of broken promises and unspoken regrets. Emma's face flickered in the shadows of my mind, her tear-filled eyes pleading for forgiveness that I struggled to grant. Meanwhile, Emma remained in our shared home, grappling with her own turmoil of guilt and remorse. She immersed herself in the familiar routine of caring for our garden, tending to the plants with a distracted focus that mirrored the chaos of her inner turmoil. Each flower and leaf bore witness to the silent agony of her heart, a heart torn between loyalty to our marriage and the irresistible pull of her feelings for Eric. Days turned into weeks as Emma and I navigated the uncharted waters of separation, a period marked by longing glances at empty spaces once filled with laughter and shared dreams. We exchanged occasional messages, tentative attempts at communication that faltered under the weight of unspoken grievances and unanswered questions. In moments of solitude, I reflected on the unraveling of our marriage, the gradual erosion of trust and intimacy that had paved the way for Emma's emotional affair with Eric. I wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and betrayal, questioning my role in the breakdown of our once solid foundation. Amidst the turmoil, a sense of clarity began to emerge, a realization that our paths had diverged irreversibly, leading us to the painful crossroads of separation. Emma's emotional connection with Eric had exposed fault lines in our relationship that I could no longer ignore, a realization that demanded introspection and a reckoning with my own vulnerabilities. One evening, as I sat alone in the dim glow of the apartment's solitary lamp, a message from Emma illuminated the screen of my phone. "Can we talk?" her text read, the words tinged with a vulnerability that mirrored my own. I hesitated before replying, my thumb hovering over the screen as I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Did I have the strength to confront Emma again, to face the raw ache of our shattered love and the uncertain future that lay ahead? With a deep breath, I typed out a simple response. "Yes," I sent back, the weight of my decision settling heavily upon me. Minutes passed before Emma's response appeared, a single word that held the weight of 1,000 unspoken apologies and unfulfilled promises. "Please." In the days that followed, Emma and I met in a neutral place, a quiet cafe nestled in the heart of the city, its walls witness to countless conversations that had shaped the course of our lives. We sat across from each other, our hands clutching steaming cups of coffee that offered little comfort against the chill of our fractured bond. "I'm sorry," Emma began softly, her voice trembling with the weight of unspoken regrets. "I never meant to hurt you." I nodded silently, my own words caught in the tightness of my throat. The pain of Emma's betrayal lingered between us, a palpable presence that strained against the fragile threads of our shared history. "I know I've hurt you deeply," Emma continued, her eyes filled with tears that mirrored my own. "I never wanted—" Her words faltered, lost in the turbulent sea of emotions that threatened to drown us both. I reached across the table tentatively, my fingers brushing against Emma's in a silent gesture of solidarity amidst the wreckage of our shattered love. "We need to talk about what comes next," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within me. Emma nodded slowly, her gaze locking with mine in a silent acknowledgement of the painful truth we both knew. Our marriage had reached its breaking point, a crossroads where forgiveness and healing seemed like distant shores on a tumultuous sea. In the days and weeks that followed our meeting, Emma and I navigated the logistics of separation with a quiet determination born of mutual respect and a shared desire for closure. We divided our belongings, untangled the intricacies of shared finances, and began the painful process of unraveling the threads that had once bound us together. Through it all, Emma and I maintained a fragile semblance of civility, a testament to the love and respect that had once defined our marriage. We exchanged occasional messages, each one tinged with the bittersweet ache of goodbye, and the quiet hope for a future where wounds could heal and hearts could mend. As I packed my belongings and prepared to leave the apartment behind, I carried with me the weight of Emma's tearful apologies and the haunting echoes of our fractured love. In the quiet solitude of a new beginning, I found solace in the knowledge that separation was not an end, but a painful yet necessary step towards healing and renewal. Emma and I parted ways with a shared understanding, an understanding that our paths had diverged, leading us towards separate horizons shaped by the lessons of love, loss, and the courage to embrace the uncertain journey ahead. In the weeks that followed our meeting at the cafe, Emma and I navigated the final steps of our separation with a mixture of sadness and quiet resolve. The decision to end our marriage had been agonizing, yet it had also brought a sense of clarity and acceptance that we both desperately needed. We met one last time in our now empty home to finalize the remaining details of our separation. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of unspoken words and the echo of memories that lingered in every corner, a silent testament to the life we had once shared. "I've packed up my things," I began quietly, my voice breaking the silence that hung between us like a heavy shroud. Emma nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I have too," she replied softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. Together we moved through the familiar rooms, dividing our belongings with a sense of detachment that belied the ache in our hearts. Each item held a story, a reminder of moments shared, dreams pursued, and the gradual unraveling of our once solid bond. As we stood in the empty bedroom that had once been the sanctuary of our love, Emma reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against mine in a fleeting gesture of farewell. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice filled with remorse. I nodded wordlessly, unable to find the right words to express the depth of my own sorrow and regret. The pain of our separation weighed heavily upon us, a poignant reminder of the love we had lost and the wounds that would take time to heal. In the days that followed, Emma and I finalized the legal aspects of our separation with a sense of finality that echoed in the silence of our now empty home. We signed papers, exchanged possessions, and settled the details of our shared life with a quiet determination to move forward separately. Amidst the logistical arrangements, Emma and I found moments of closure, a shared understanding that our decision to part ways was not a failure, but a necessary step towards reclaiming our individual paths. We exchanged heartfelt letters, each one a bittersweet farewell that held the promise of healing and renewal. I will always cherish the memories we shared, Emma wrote in one letter, her words a poignant reminder of the love and happiness that had once defined our marriage. Thank you for everything. Tears blurred my vision as I read Emma's words, a testament to the depth of emotion that still lingered despite the pain of our parting. I penned my own response, expressing gratitude for the lessons learned and the hope for a future where we could both find happiness and fulfillment. In the quiet solitude of my new home, I unpacked my belongings and began the slow process of rebuilding my life. Memories of Emma and our time together lingered like ghosts in the corners of my mind, a reminder of the love that had shaped me and the pain that had reshaped my path. Months they were past, marked by moments of introspection and gradual healing. I immersed myself in work and hobbies, rediscovering passions that had lain dormant amidst the turbulence of our marriage. Friends reached out with words of comfort and support, offering a lifeline of companionship during moments of solitude. Occasionally, I would hear news of Emma through mutual acquaintances, a glimpse into her life as she navigated her own journey of healing and self-discovery. Though our paths had diverged, I wished her nothing but happiness and fulfillment, a silent prayer for the wounds of our past to heal and the promise of new beginnings to unfold. As time passed, the ache of our separation softened into a quiet acceptance, a recognition that endings could also be beginnings, and that the pain of letting go could pave the way for new experiences and unexpected joys. In the embrace of solitude and the gentle rhythm of everyday life, I found solace in the knowledge that Emma and I had both embarked on separate paths, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love, loss, and the courage to embrace the unknown. And so, with a heart tempered by experience and a spirit renewed by the promise of tomorrow, I embrace the future with hope, a future shaped by the lessons of our past and the unwavering belief in the possibility of second chances, new beginnings, and the enduring resilience of the human heart.